Thank you, Deputy Jones. In the case of People versus Conrad Robert Murray, Dr. Murray is present with his counsel, Mr. Chernoff, Mr. Flanagan, Mr. Gorgian, Mr. Pena. The people by counsel, Mr. Walgren and Ms. Brazil. Dr. Shafer once again is on the witness stand. All 12 jurors and the 5 alternates are present. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. We are going to resume with the direct examination of Dr. Shafer. Dr. Shafer, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You acknowledge you are still under oath and you are still sworn to tell the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please remember the admonitions as well. This will be a resumption of direct examination by the people through Mr. Walgren. Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Mr. Walgren.
Dr. Shafer, we ended yesterday with you summarizing your findings regarding the standard of care and your opinions regarding the treatment of Michael Jackson by Dr. Murray, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I want to begin this morning by talking about propofol. Do you recall speaking to me back in March 2011 when I inquired if you would be willing to provide your expert opinion in this case?
Yes, I do.
And at that time, were you provided, or shortly thereafter, provided a large number of materials from this case involving medical records, interview statement, and the like?
Yes.
And at that time, did I also provide you a copy of a report dated March 8, 2011, written by your friend and colleague, Dr. Paul White?
Yes, you did.
And did you review that report of Dr. White dated March 8, 2011?
Yes, I did.
And in that report, did Dr. White suggest that Michael Jackson may have orally consumed propofol causing his death?
Yes, he did.
And what was your reaction to that?
I was disappointed because it's not possible.
And why is it not possible?
Because just on first principles alone, oral propofol has no biological activity.
And what do you mean by first principles?
Propofol is so rapidly metabolized by the liver that very little propofol gets past the liver. Everything that enters the stomach or the intestine goes first to the liver. That's how the blood flow, that's the plumbing. So when a drug is put into the stomach, it's absorbed into the blood, and it first goes to the liver. The liver is so avidly, the liver has such powerful mechanisms for metabolizing propofol that only a very small percent can get past the liver. This is a principle that is taught to first-year medical students. And it's called the first pass effect. And it means when anything you eat, it first passes the liver. And the first pass effect is what the liver does that first time it sees it coming from the stomach. And in the case of propofol, you would expect nearly all of the drug to be removed by this first pass effect.
You're going to be walking through a PowerPoint presentation with Dr. Shafer. We need to switch anything? Okay.
Would you like lights to begin?
Let me see how it shows up, Your Honor,
All right.
please. IT person, the deputy, Your Honor.
Conferring with Deputy Jones.
Well, that's rebooting, Your Honor. I do have a hard copy of the slides that I'll be going through. I'd ask that this multi-page document entitled Propofol Not Orally Bioavailable be marked People's, is it 216, Your Honor?
It is. And how many pages, please? Thank you. It's Mark. Mr. Chernoff, you have that?
I do, Judge.
Thank you.
Dr. Shafer, while the PowerPoint prepares itself, I'll proceed with the ELMO. Showing you People's 216. Was this are these PowerPoint slides that you prepared to present your testimony?
Yes, they are.
It's entitled Propofol Not Orally Bioavailable?
Yes.
What does that mean to say propofol is not orally bioavailable?
Bioavailable refers to whether or not the drug is available to the body after it's given, in this case, orally. If you inject something intravenously, by definition, it's all in your bloodstream. But if you eat something, it may or may not get into the bloodstream. And the amount that gets into the bloodstream is the amount that is called bioavailable.
And when you say it's not bioavailable, that goes back to how if it's orally ingested, it would go into the stomach.
Correct.
It would be processed through the liver.
Correct.
And essentially, the drug would be cleaned out by the body before it entered the bloodstream in any significant manner. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Looking to page 1, it's actually page 2. Page 1 is the title. Page 2 of People's 216. Can you see that from where you're seated?
Yes, I
Doctor?
can.
How about the jurors? Can you see it?
And can you just kind of generally walk us through this slowly and show what's depicted here?
Yes. So, quite obviously, this is the digestive tract here. And this right here shows the mouth. This is the esophagus. The esophagus is the tube that connects the mouth to the stomach. The stomach is this piece here. And that is where the drug is first processed, of course. From there, it goes into the small intestines. From the small intestines, it would go into the large intestine, if there's anything still there, and eventually out through the rectum. This is the liver. Basically, this huge, it's actually maroon in color. And all of the blood from all of these organs first flow through to the liver.
So just the path it would take then. So it goes down this esophagus.
So the path it would take is the propofol would come down the esophagus into the stomach, and then absorption would start almost immediately because the nature of the propofol molecule is that it can pass quite quickly through biological membranes. That's just the chemistry of it allows it to pass through biological membranes. By that I mean like the tissue of the stomach. And so it would start passing through the biological membranes. Actually, it starts passing from the moment it enters the mouth here, but in quantities that are trivial. But here, where it stops, it passes through into the bloodstream. But all of that blood, all of this blood here, will take it through the liver. And only after that blood passes through the liver does that blood then return to something called the vena cava, which is the large blood vessel that takes the blood back to the heart.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll stick with this, Dr. Shafer. Going to the next page of People's 216. It's working against me. This next page, Dr. Shafer, this is the digestive tract?
That is correct.
Okay, can you explain what we're looking at in this slide and kind of walk us through what it depicts?
The point of this slide is just to show that the veins that come from the digestive tract all go to the liver, so that you have a mental image of what that is. So the esophagus is right back here, coming behind the liver, and here it goes into the stomach. And if you take a look at this blue piece here, that's the vein that leaves the stomach, but it comes up here to something called the portal vein. And that then takes the blood to the liver. If we take a look here at the intestines, depicted down here, again, that goes into this vein here, which comes up and joins the vein and takes it into the liver. If we take a look at the colon showing here, what you can see is those veins all come back into this vein and go into the liver. So this is the stomach. The spleen is not involved in this, so we're not going to pay attention to that. And this right here would be the pancreas. This right here is the small intestine. This large coil here is the large intestine. The liver, and when we talk about lorazepam, we'll also spend time talking about the gallbladder, which is located right here. But the main point, the only point for this discussion of propofol is that all of the veins leaving the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine, they all come together at this vein right here called the portal vein, and they go first to the liver where the propofol is subjected to metabolism.
And that's what you alluded to earlier regarding first pass effect?
That is correct.
And the first pass effect then of propofol as it goes through the liver, how would you characterize the degree to which it's deactivated.
The overall amount of blood from pharmacokinetic, functionally, it is about 99%.
99% of the drug
Is removed.
Is removed before it enters
The body.
Okay.
Correct.
So there'd be no reason to expect that oral propofol would have any biological activity in the body.
Correct. May I add one qualifier?
Objection, non-responsive.
It's attempting to explain his
Overruled. You may.
We've learned recently that, in fact, the propofol is metabolized at two different places. This is just recent information. And that is that the lining of the gut itself is very active against propofol. And that's recent information. Because if you were to look at the liver alone, you might expect maybe 5-10% of the propofol to get past it, just looking at the liver alone. But the gut itself, these tissues here, have metabolic activity also. So the 100% first-pass metabolism, or 99%, is correct. But from recent information, it's a little more complex, and I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay. But based on these fundamental, or what you call first principles alone, in your April 2011 report, you opined that there was zero possibility
Absolutely.
that Michael Jackson had died as a result of oral ingestion of propofol.
Absolutely.
Okay. Based on what you've described here as these fundamental principles that are taught to first-year medical students.
Correct.
Now, at the time that you received Dr. White's report where he suggested oral propofol was a possibility in March 2011, was there also research available through animal studies confirming the first pass effect, in your opinion, that there was zero possibility Michael Jackson orally ingested propofol?
Yes, there was.
Going to the next page of People's 216. It has a header from a publication. It's entitled Interaction Studies and Other Investigations of the Pharmacology of Propofol, parentheses, Diprovan. First, can you describe, this article was published in, is that
1985.
1985? Okay.
Yes.
And the principal author of this publication, J.B. Glenn, are you familiar with that individual?
Yes, I know him quite well.
And who is that as it relates to research and study and knowledge in regard to propofol?
Dr. Glenn is a scientist at the company which developed propofol as a drug. At the time, the company was called ICI. Stands for Empirical Chemical Industry. It's a British company. And ICI started working on propofol in, I believe, about 1973. And Ian Glenn was responsible for the development, including some changes that had to be made in how the product was created for 15 years. And Ian Glenn is the person who really would deserve the title the father of propofol, because he is the one who saw the possibilities of the drug and pursued development, which has ups and downs, for 15 years to bring propofol to the market.
And is Dr. Glenn considered one of the leading authorities regarding this early research in propofol?
Yes, he did the research.
Now, this particular study that was published in 1985, what did it show?
The study looked at propofol given by various routes of delivery, and it was given to mice often a good species to start with. And what they found was that intravenous doses of 5 to 15 milligrams per kilogram, that's how much you give depending on the weight of the mouse. Intravenous doses were effective, but even a dose of 300 milligrams per kilogram, 20 times more, 300 milligrams per kilogram, did not cause the animals to go into general anesthesia. They were sleepy, but it's a massive dose, and that was not able to produce general anesthesia. So it showed that a 20-fold overdose given orally to the mouse was not able to produce general anesthesia.
And in 1985, it was published that it was thought to be due to the hepatic metabolism of the drug reaching the liver via the portal circulation.
Yes, which is exactly what I just explained. The portal circulation is that great big blue vein that goes to the liver, and with all the drug through that is subject to hepatic metabolism, and it says here, I'll just read, the failure to induce anesthesia with a massive dose is thought to be hepatic metabolism of the drug reaching the liver via the portal circulation, in other words, first pass metabolism.
Dr. Shafer, going forward with the research in regard to the oral bioavailability of propofol, going to the next page of your presentation, another heading of a manuscript entitled a comparative study of intravenous and rectal administration of propofol in piglets, and this has a publication date of 1991.
Correct.
And you looked at this study as well?
Correct.
And what did this study, published in 1991, show as it relates to the possibility of oral ingestion of propofol being a cause of death in this case?
Well, first, what it shows is that the bioavailability is less than 1%, 0.4. So it shows less than 1% of the drug would be available. It's important to remember that diagram I showed you, because you remember the colon.
The witness is answering the question. The objection is overruled. You may continue, sir.
It's important to remember the diagram where the colon also drains to the liver, just like the stomach drains to the liver. So the fact that it was rectal administration does not change the applicability to oral administration, because both routes of administration drain to the liver.
And with the finding in this 1991 publication that less than 1% would be available in the body, that again is in line with your conclusion that at least 99% of it is actually processed through the liver and the drug is basically cleaned out of the system.
Correct.
Next, Dr. Shafer, another publication entitled In Vivo Assessment of Intestinal, Hepatic, and Pulmonary First Pass Metabolism of Propofol in the Rat. And this is, this is published in 1996?
Correct.
And can you describe this research and the conclusions of this article?
So again, I'll just read straight out here. Large first pass effect in the rat. They actually found 10%, not 1%, but 10% appeared in the systemic circulation in this study. So they found a higher percentage than 1%. It's a different species, but still a small fraction of the administered dose was available through absorption after being administered orally to the rat.
And again, this was published in 1996?
I believe that's correct, yes. Thank you, yes.
And again, even this article then suggesting that at least 90% is cleaned out through the liver through first pass effect.
In this study, yes.
Now, in your review and analysis of this case, did you also refer to particular United States patents that had included their research in the oral bioavailability of propofol?
Yes, I did.
Going to the next page of your slides with a U.S. patent dated, and I'll just reference it by the date of patent, June 23rd, 2009. First of all, how did you become aware of this patent, since I assume it was not a published manuscript in a journal?
Google.
And did you review this patent in your assessment of the possibility of oral ingestion of propofol?
Over the summer, yes.
Okay. And what did this patent reveal to you as far as the research findings included in the patent itself?
This patent described a study, also in rats. But in this study here, the bioavailability was less than 1%, 0.23, which would be a quarter of 1%. So it was interesting to me that the one study we saw a moment ago was 10% bioavailability. This study, also in rats, shows less than 1% bioavailability. So there is some study-to-study difference in rats. I don't know why. But it's clear that the overall pattern, that propofol is not orally bioavailability in animals, was demonstrated by this patent.
Going to the next page of People's 216, an additional United States patent. This one dated November 17, 2009. Can you describe this patent and the research that was included in this patent that supported your finding that there is zero possibility of oral ingestion in this case?
Oral ingestion, or is that the terminology you want to use? Oral ingestion?
No. The oral bioavailability of propofol. Thank you, Your Honor.
So the possibility that propofol was consumed and then had an effect on Michael Jackson is ruled out here as well. Because in this study, they gave oral propofol to dogs and to monkeys. And they then measured how much appeared in the blood. And less than 1%, only 0.25%, quarter of a percent, appeared in the blood in dogs and monkeys who were given oral propofol.
So at the time of Dr. Paul White's report, where he suggested that there was oral bioavailability to propofol, and that this could have been...
Dr. White, that it misstates absolutely the evidence.
Just a moment. The objection is sustained. You may rephrase your question.
Well, you reviewed Dr. White's report?
Yes.
In the report, did he suggest that Michael Jackson drank propofol and
Yes.
that could have led to his death?
Yes.
Okay. And at the time of Dr. White's report, dated March 8, 2011, the studies you just summarized from 1985, 1991, 1996, and the two separate patents from 2009, those were all available either in the literature or by doing a Google search?
Correct.
And all of these studies supported your findings in your report in April 2011 that there was zero possibility that this was the cause of Michael Jackson's death.
Correct.
Now, knowing that this was a claim being put forth as a possibility by Dr. White,
Objection.
Did you-
That misstates.
I'll sustain the objection to the phrase. Re-ask.
knowing what you read in Dr. White's report and what he wrote in his report, did you then pursue conducting a study in human volunteers to get human data on the oral bioavailability of propofol?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, prior to doing that, had there been any human studies regarding the oral bioavailability of propofol?
Not that. It's an interesting question. A company was engaged in looking at this study, at this question. And they may have conducted studies, but they have not been published.
Okay.
And so I don't know whether they studied it in humans or not, but certainly there was nothing published that I could find on human research.
And do you know why that was, that there had been no published manuscripts on this topic?
I think the answer was considered obvious, that it wouldn't be bioavailable, and so it wasn't an interesting question.
Did you then do and participate in conducting a study in Chile with human volunteers?
Yes, I did.
And was that done with Dr. Pablo Sepulveda, an anesthesiologist in Chile?
Yes, it was.
And who is Dr. Sepulveda?
Dr. Sepulveda is a professor of anesthesiology in Chile, and a personal friend. And he is one of the leaders, both in Chile but also internationally, in contemporary studies of pharmacokinetics of intravenous anesthetics. He's also the past president of the Chilean Society of Anesthesiologists and was the host of the conference that I attended in Chile in May.
And when you attended this conference in Chile in May, I assume this was a conference with respect to your field of study?
Correct.
And did you at that time ask Dr. Sepulveda if he would help conduct this study in humans regarding the oral bioavailability of propofol?
Yes.
And did he agree to work with you in conducting that study?
Yes.
And were results obtained from human volunteers that actually consumed propofol by simply drinking it?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe the basic parameters of the study? How many subjects were involved? How much did they drink? Things of that nature.
There were 6 subjects in the study. The first 3 drank 20 milliliters of propofol. And
Let me just stop you for one moment, Doctor. 20 milliliters of propofol is 200 milligrams,
that is correct.
and a 20 milliliter bottle is what's represented here in People's 102, the smaller size vial?
Correct.
Okay. And the 20 milliliters,
Judge, in light of the fact that we have...
Just a moment. If you want to address something by speaking, I
this
think
is
we
not
do it
gonna
at
be-
sidebar.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you. Overruled. Mr. Waldron?
Thank you. Dr. Shafer, Peoples 102, at 10 milligrams per milliliter, a 20 milliliter bottle then is 200 milligrams of propofol, correct?
That's correct.
And so, I'm sorry, you said that 3 volunteers drank,
200 milligrams.
okay. And there were other volunteers in the study?
Yes, and the next 3 drank twice that dose, 400 milligrams of propofol.
And with these 6 subjects, 3 of them drinking 200 milligrams, 3 of them drinking 400 milligrams, was a conclusion drawn, was data collected from the result of these individuals orally consuming the propofol?
Yes. First, pulse oximetry was measured, blood pressure was measured, and sedation was measured using a common scale to assess sedation that we use in anesthesia. Additionally, at regular intervals, blood was taken from a vein in the arm and was measured for propofol.
So the level of sedation then was measured in each of these 6 subjects?
Repeatedly.
And what is the observer's assessment of alertness and sedation?
That is the name of the scale. That's the name of the scale that we use, the observer's assessment of alertness and sedation. And it's a common, and we say validated, which means it's been checked. It's a common validated scale in anesthesia studies.
And based on this scale, were any of the 6 subjects, either the 200 milligram or 400 milligram, were any of them sedated at any time as a result of orally consuming the propofol?
No, there was no sedation at any time following oral consumption of propofol.
And you indicated that there were oxygen saturation was measured continuously throughout the study?
Yes.
Did the level of oxygen ever drop?
No.
And you mentioned blood pressure. That was measured continuously throughout the study?
It was.
And did the blood pressure ever drop in any of the subjects throughout the study?
No.
And did you actually just last week present this study as or did you present this to a body of individuals?
The study was presented. Unfortunately, I missed the presentation.
Okay. And it was presented where?
It was presented at the meeting of the International Society of Anesthetic Pharmacology in Chicago last Friday.
And what is that conference or that meeting?
This is a society that goes back about 25 years, and it's the primary society that brings together scientists and doctors interested in the pharmacology of anesthetic drugs. So it holds a wonderful meeting, sorry for the ad, once a year. And in my view, it really is the place where all of the sort of breaking science in the field of pharmacology and anesthesia is presented.
Objection to relevance.
Overruled. Next question, please.
And at this same conference where this, well, let me put it up here, the next slide. Is this the, essentially the heading of the study that you just described entitled The Bioavailability of Oral Propofol in Humans? And could you please list off the 3 authors of that study?
Yes. This was presented. I wasn't there, but it was put on a poster and presented. And Victor Contreras is the person who was primarily doing the study with Dr. Pablo Sepulveda, the second author, and I am the 3rd author listed there. I did the analysis and wrote the paper.
And this slide accurately depicts what you've just referenced, that the measurable sedation, none, oxygen desaturation, none, and drop in blood pressure, none?
Correct.
At that same conference just this past Friday, were you also the recipient of a Lifetime Award?
Yes, I was.
And what was that, Dr. Shafer?
It's a Lifetime Achievement Award for my work in anesthetic pharmacology.
Going to the last slide. Again, showing the heading of your manuscript and the statement, there was no effect of oral propofol. Is that, in fact, the conclusion and the findings from that human study that you conducted in Chile?
Yes.
Now, was it this trial and your review of Dr. White's report one of the reasons you pursued this human study?
Yes.
Was it the only reason?
No.
What was the other reason?
There is an effort by the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, to make propofol a restricted drug in the sense that it has to be handled almost as though it were something like morphine. And it was my view that the publicity about the possibility of Michael Jackson drinking propofol might be one of the reasons that this is being pursued by the Drug Enforcement Administration. My personal belief is that patients will be hurt if propofol is scheduled.
Why is that?
This is a drug used to maintain anesthesia. Anesthesiologists have to be able to have ready access during anesthesia, because if you run out, the patient will wake up. You have to be able to have access to the drug quickly. And anything that blocks that access, such as additional paperwork requirements, I believe places patients at increased risk. So I believe this study, by showing the drug cannot be abused orally, means that if the drug is abused, it will only be done with an intravenous route, which limits the vulnerable population to healthcare providers. The general public typically doesn't have IVs and things like this available the way they can just drink a drug. So I felt that it addressed an important question in the dialogue about propofol, what's called scheduling, restricting propofol and placing paperwork hurdles to have access to it.
Then, Dr. Shafer, on the topic of the lack of oral bioavailability of propofol, you rejected that theory from the outset, as you put and concluded in your April 2011 report.
I rejected that theory in our initial phone call of March 31st, approximately.
Based at that time on the very fundamental medical principles of first past effect.
Correct.
And then you sought out additional research and concluded with actually conducting a human study of this area.
Correct.
And that subsequent research, as well as this Chilean study, simply confirmed your initial finding that there was zero possibility that Michael's oral ingestion of propofol,
Correct.
whether it occurred or not, caused his death.
Correct.
Your Honor, I have another packet of slides entitled Lorazepam. I'll count the pages, but first I have to ask that this be marked Peoples 217 for identification.
Collectively, yes,
Would the court like me to count?
if you wouldn't mind, please.
I counted 22 with the title page, Your Honor.
Thank you. Do you have that, Mr. Chernow?
I do, Judge. We have sort of a mixture here. Can we approach and discuss three of these pages?
Well, maybe counsel can discuss. Is that what you want?
Okay, that'd be fine.
Can
Yeah.
I don't know if I can be of any
Yeah,
assistance.
okay, sure.
Just away from the mic. Thank you. Sorry for the delay. Did you have brunch during our absence, ladies? Thank you. You may resume, Mr. Walgen.
Thank you, and I believe I'd indicated it was a 22-page document. Is that?
That's it. And you do have it, Mr. Chernoff?
Yes, Judge.
Thank you. Mark?
People's 217, Your Honor?
It is?
Thank you.
All right.
Moving away from the oral propofol theory, I want to talk to you about oral lorazepam and lorazepam in general.
Yes.
Did you likewise prepare some slides, and this one entitled Lorazepam, marked People's 217, that documents and describes some of the principles surrounding the pharmacokinetics of lorazepam?
Yes, I did.
And you had yesterday explained to us that you were the principal investigator, and I'm looking at the first page of this packet. We had gone over this article, a double-blind randomized comparison of IV lorazepam versus midazolam for sedation of ICU patients via a pharmacologic model. And you, right?
With Dr. Geller, yes.
Okay. And in this presentation that's contained in People's 217 and your knowledge of lorazepam, was this study shown on the ELMO one of the studies that you relied upon?
Yes.
And I believe you had briefly described it yesterday, but can you describe for us now in this context what this study was, what it represents, and what the findings were?
Yes. This study looked at lorazepam or midazolam. They were given in the intensive care unit by a computer. We used a computer to give the drugs so that we could target exactly the right amount of drug in the blood. Also, in the intensive care unit, patients are there for a long period of time, and the computer precisely records how much drug it gave. So we have very precise records over a period of days about how much drug was given. With the computer, we would increase the amount of drug in the blood if the person needed more sedation, or we would reduce the amount of drug, but again, all controlled by the computer. And it was a double-blind study, which simply means that we didn't know which drug the computer was giving. The computer knew. The computer knew if it was lorazepam or midazolam, but the person using the computer did not know, so that we were trying to see if there was a difference between lorazepam and midazolam in the intensive care unit. We gathered blood levels from the artery, and we used those blood levels that were gathered at regular intervals from the artery to get a very precise model to link the dose of lorazepam or midazolam to the concentration in the blood.
And why did you rely upon this study in this case?
I relied upon it because of the amount of data gathered in this study was huge. I don't recall the number of subjects, although I can look at the paper and tell you. But each subject was studied very intensively over a period of days. And so, in my view, this study provides the best pharmacokinetic model to use to predict lorazepam concentrations after a dose.
And in that field of pharmacokinetics, is this article widely relied upon and cited by other researchers?
Yes.
Where was this study done?
This study was done at Stanford University, specifically the Palo Alto Administration's Veterans Hospital.
And you indicated, I believe, that both you and Dr. Geller were the principal investigators?
Correct.
And who was responsible for what as it pertained to this study?
Dr. Geller was responsible for conducting the study. He was the head of the intensive care unit. So these were his patients, and he was responsible for conducting the study, and I was responsible for the data analysis.
May I have just one moment, Your Honor? Now, Dr. Shafer, you've reviewed, in your analysis of the case, you reviewed the toxicology findings. Are you aware that the lorazepam measured at 0.169 in the femoral blood?
I am.
And are you aware from the defendant's statement that he stated he gave just 4 milligrams of lorazepam throughout the night in 2 separate 2-milligram dosages?
I am.
And in your analysis of the case, did you conduct one of your models or simulations to compare whether that dosage of 4 milligrams of lorazepam would match up to a reading of 0.169 lorazepam in the femoral blood?
I did.
Going then to the next slide. Of People's 217. Can you, first of all, just very simply kind of walk us through this model, what is represented, and kind of describe the components of the model before we get into the substance of it, please?
Glad to. There will be a lot of pictures like this coming up, so let me orient you to what we're looking at. Down here is time, and pharmacokinetic models, drugs in motion, talk about what happens to drugs over time. So this looks at the time since midnight. That would be midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and allows us to see over time what's happening to the concentration of drug. Now what the model predicts is this thing here, the plasma lorazepam concentration. How much lorazepam, what concentration of lorazepam is in the plasma. And it starts at 0, because the model assumes when you start off here that there's no drug. That's the way these models start. The body starts empty. And then Conrad Murray, in his interview, stated that at 2 o'clock, approximately, he gave 2 milligrams. And what this shows is the blood concentration with a 2 milligram dose. And what you look at here and say, well, gee, it starts at 0, but right after he pushes that into the vein, the blood concentration goes to about 0.05. So I can see what we would have measured if you had measured the concentration in the blood. Now, of course, the body starts working on it immediately. The body starts trying to metabolize it immediately. And additionally, the drug initially is all in the vein, but over a few minutes it starts to go into other tissues. Here we're only looking at the amount in the blood. That's all we're trying to predict. But both because of metabolism and also because the drug is moving into other tissue, something we call distribution. It's distributing to these other tissues. Because of that, the concentrations fall quite quickly. And you can see here, right after the dose, it goes up to 0.05. But an hour later, it's about a third of that. So it goes up and it falls. Some of that is the liver removing the drug. Most of that is actually the drug moving into other tissue. That's really what mostly is reducing the concentration. And then, coming up here at 5.
And that represents 5 a.m.
5 a.m., there's another 2 milligram dose. Well, we get to a higher level. The reason we get to a higher level is there's already drug in the body. So we're stacking this dose on top of the concentrations that had been there when the dose was given. And at this point here, you see it going up not quite to 0.05, but a little bit higher, because it's got this dose that it's being stacked on top of. But again, there's a very rapid washout of drug. So that by 6 o'clock in the morning, we're down here, maybe about 0.3, 0.4. I have this all on my laptop. I can give you the exact number. But we're down to about a third. And by noon, by the time of Michael Jackson's death, we are looking at a predicted concentration in the femoral vein, that's where the drug was measured on autopsy, that's only 10% of what was measured. It's only 10% of what was measured. So this did not happen.
And again, the red line represents
The blood concentration. I chose red for blood. It's the blood concentration.
and this green line indicating femoral
Thank
vein
you.
concentration. What is that?
So that is correct. This green line right here, femoral vein concentration, is what was measured on autopsy. That's the 0.169 that was measured. 0.15, 0.20, 0.169 is right here. And it gives us, if you will, a target. This is the number that we need to account for, because that's what they measured. And this dose of two doses of 2 milligrams doesn't get you there. It's not consistent with what was found on autopsy.
So Michael Jackson received more than 4 milligrams of lorazepam.
Correct.
Objection misstates the evidence,
I'm gonna
whether he
sustain-
was...
I'll sustain the objection to the characterization, and the answer stricken, disregard it.
The blood levels prove to you that there's more than 4 milligrams of lorazepam administered to Michael Jackson.
Absolutely.
Your Honor, may I inquire what time the court's going to take a break?
I was thinking about 10:15.
I'm wondering if we could do a little early so I could try to get the PowerPoint. I think it'll be important to have better color in the slides.
Mr. Chernoff, is that okay? Sure. Hopefully it's okay, so you can have brunch, ladies and gentlemen. Please remember all the admonishments, and we'll be taking the mid-morning break at this time. It's about 15 minutes or so. Thank you.